Money, if you're first handling it for the first time I did actually was when I sold my business. I thought, what am I going to do with that money? I've never managed my own money. Even though I ran my business, I had a partner who managed the money for me.
Right.
And so I was just afraid of losing it. So I just kept it in my checking account, $66 million for 2 years, because I was afraid of touching it. And most people would think that I would be good with money, but I was very good at earning it. But I wasn't very good. I didn't feel at all very good at investing it or managing it.
Well, this week's guest really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. I am speaking to a shark, the Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank. And you just heard Barbara say she sold her real estate empire for $66 million and then sat on it for 2 years because she didn't know what to do next with it. We've been talking about money all month, but in this conversation, we're going to talk about women and money and why we feel insecure handling it, even though women control the strong majority of wealth in this country. You're going to hear about Barbara's story. She got straight D's in high school and college. She had 20 jobs by the time she was 23 years old, and then borrowed $1,000 to quit her waitressing job so that she could start her tiny real estate company, which again, she sold for $66 million. Now, I just mentioned that women control the majority of wealth in this country, but only 25% of us feel confident handling money, and we struggle to know our worth and our value. So Barbara's going to give her best advice for women when it comes to money, and she's going to answer a lot of your questions about money and finances. As always, I keep these conversations going in my personal newsletter at paulaferrisofficial.com. You'll always get a sneak peek at what's coming up on the podcast, and I also share an inside look at what it's like to be a working parent here in America. Make sure you stick around to after the conversation. I'm going to share my takeaways and also something that really helped relieve a lot of tension for me personally when it comes to women and money. But without further ado, the one, the only, the shark, Barbara Corcoran. Barbara, I know we have limited time today, but thank you for taking the time. Thanks to your team for coordinating this. So I want to talk to you about women and money and why we are so insecure handling it. I mean, you know the stats. Women are managing and in control of over half of the wealth in this country, and those numbers are going to go up significantly over the next decade. Yet only 25% of women are confident making financial decisions, Barbara. I know you are probably the outlier. Part of that has to do with, your scrappiness of being one of 10 kids and just the way that you hustled your way to the top and sold your real estate group for $66 million. So kudos to you. But why do you think, when you look at it, why do you think women are so insecure with handling money?
I think it starts with inexperience. They're not accustomed to handling it. They're still operating from a page where the man made most of the money, usually outperformed her in what income she was bringing in. So they never really had to contend with money. Their job was more on the home front. So there was a comfort level. Whereas money, if you're first handling it for the first time I did actually was when I sold my business. I thought, what am I going to do with that money? I've never managed my own money. Even though I ran my business, I had a partner who managed the money for me.
Right.
And so I was just afraid of losing it. So I just kept it in my checking account, $66 million for 2 years, because I was afraid of touching it. And most people would think that I would be good with money, but I was very good at earning it, but I wasn't very good. I didn't feel at all very good at investing it or managing it.
And I think that inexperience, and also we're trying to navigate a system that really isn't built for us, that wasn't built for us. And you lived through this. 1974, women were actively legislated against until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed in 1974, which is insane to me. Like, I posted something about this not long ago and people were like, no way. So until 1974, again, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, married women, single women, we couldn't get a mortgage. We couldn't get a credit card without the signature of either our husband
it was late to change.
or a man.
It sounds like the turn of the century kind of thing.
It really does. But how much of that plays into maybe the insecurity? Are we supposed to be handling it? Are we even good with money? Why we don't ask for raises? Because again, we're navigating a system that wasn't built for us and one that actively legislated against us handling money. How much does that have to do with it?
I'm sure that painted a background to play against, but I think in the end, it's more about the individual and how much experience they've had with money and how confident they are in how they spend it.
Yeah. So many women, we struggle to know our worth. And Barbara, your story of, straight D's in high school and college, you had 20 jobs by the time you were 23. You borrowed $1,000, quit your waitressing job, and then started your tiny real estate company in New York City, the Corcoran Group. You went out there and put yourself out there. So many women, though, struggle to know our worth. That's why we don't ask for raises as often as men. Do you think that's why we struggle? Why do you think, when you look at it, why we struggle asking for raises? And when men ask for raises 4 times more than we do, they ask for 30% more. So kudos to guys for going for it. We just struggle to know our worth.
Yes, we all struggle to know our worth, and we all struggle to feel worthy. I
Yeah.
think the best thing for women to realize is wherever they start their job, usually a year later, they're doing a lot more. So if they could put a value on the other things they're doing, they deserve a raise, they might ask for it more. But women don't take it seriously. Women just don't ask. I know I hired thousands of people over my career, and I managed thousands of people, motivated thousands of people. I'm
Wow.
telling you, I remember one woman who came in and asked for a raise. Out of all that time, I ran the business for 18 years, whereas men regularly came in as though it was their obligation to come in and ask for a raise. Where that came from, I really don't know. I think it's part because women have a hard time taking credit for what they do. As shameful as it is, they feel like they're just not worth that extra money because that's part of their job. But a man thinks, I'm doing extra, I need more extra money.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say we don't take it as seriously. That's really interesting. I never really thought about it like that. What is your take on this quote from Judge Judy?
I love Judge Judy.
Okay, so this quote from Judge Judy, she says, once a woman gives up financial independence to a mate, it's over. You have to be prepared, because if you're not prepared, you're stuck. And more women have to accept lifestyles that are unpleasant because they are financially stuck. She says, if you're smart, that means you, as well as you teach your daughter, your granddaughters, everyone has to have something that they're good at where they can earn a living. What's your take on being financially independent?
Well, you have to be. When I left my first husband, I was married to him for 7 years. I was able to leave him, and I left him whole with enough money and enough business still already started to go forward. If I didn't have that checkbook and didn't have the money and the control, I'm sure I'd still be married to him. What it gives you is the independence to make your own decisions, what's right for your life. Most women I know who are unhappily married, if I were to cite the reason they don't leave more than anything else, it's not lack of courage. It's lack of finances. They can't get on without the husband. So they're in that position. And it's so important, so important. As you were saying that, I was guiltily thinking of my own 2 children and thinking my son is very smart with money, knows how to invest, knows the language, has educated himself, kept himself above board. And this weekend, he said to his younger sister, did you take any finance courses in college, Kate? And she said, no, I figured you'll do all that for me.
Oh,
And I didn't
yeah.
object. I didn't object. She said, what are you talking about?
Uh,
I thought, well, of course, he's going to do it for her. So perhaps I'm doing a very bad job too in this regard.
No, but I do think, we have our own biases as mothers. I parent my daughter a bit differently than my sons, but
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that wasn't easy for you to share, and you are an excellent mom. So in saying that, what would you advise your daughter, or the young women out there, our daughters, what would you advise your daughter? And you just said her name is Kate.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I would go contrary to that. I would think, what are you learning? How about you do this? What courses do they offer? What could you? I'm sure she doesn't even know how to do a checkbook, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know I would advise her that she's got to get educated and improve herself, that she can't rely on a brother. It seems absurd now that you have me think about it. I'm embarrassed. I'm not going to say anymore.
Don't be embarrassed, Barbara. Don't be embarrassed at all. But okay, so for anyone that's wanting to take steps, any woman out there that wants to take steps when it comes to money and budgeting, what would you advise? What are what's some of the best advice you can give us?
The first step is put your own money aside. Sneak it if you have to. Be like a squirrel and get it on the side so you have a little taste of power and what money can bring you, a sense of power. We all, when we had our first jobs, had that sense of power. Take your own money home, and
Yeah.
you weren't relying on your parents for what you wanted, the new sweater or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
When you say putting your money aside, you're not saying hide it from your partner, or
Why not? You have to, and you don't like your partner. Why not hide it? Put it aside somewhere.
who's can just see stacks of cash. So I know that this might be not 21st century. My husband and I share everything. We share our accounts, and so everybody, to each his own. Some people have different checking accounts. Some people, are like, well, you make 60% of the income, so you'll pay 60% of the bills. Or they say, I'll take the mortgage. You do all the
Early in the marriage, only from what I could see. No.
Yeah, yeah. So any other steps besides just putting money away? Now, let's say that this woman is, again, maybe she's stuck in a relationship. And sadly, you mentioned a lot of women are stuck in relationships, some of them harmful relationships that they really need to get out of, and they don't have that financial independency. What are they supposed to do? What is one of the first steps that they need to do when it comes to money?
I'm joking with you on this one, but anyway, I was going to say, look for a new husband who's rich and still don't. But that would be the wrong advice again. I mean, there's so much information online to educate you. I didn't really know about cash flow until I was in business for 5 years and had problems with my cash flow. Couldn't quite manage it. And I didn't really understand about it. I remember going to NYU when I was 30 years old and taking a course in basic accounting, which included cash flow. And that gave me, I'm not sure I learned everything I needed to learn, but it sure gave me the confidence to feel like I could get my hands on my own money. So I think educating yourself is a good step, not only for learning the information, but more importantly, for learning the self-confidence.
Yeah, that's good. And like you said, there's often it's an education gap, right? And that's why we
Very
feel
much
a lot
so.
of that insecurity. Okay, in your experience, we should be confident. There are so many stats to back up that we're actually good with money. And I like this quote from your fellow Shark Tank investor, Kevin O'Leary. But before I share that,
Not Kevin. Please, not Kevin.
What's
I
that?
thought you were going to say Mark. Please, not Kevin.
No, it was actually Kevin. But listen to this. In 2019, I came across this article that Forbes wrote, Barbara, and it was an article on how women-led companies compared to companies led by men. And to be honest, I didn't think it was going to fare well for the ladies. But the results were that women-led companies tend to perform better than those led by men. In fact, your pal, Kevin O'Leary, says this. He says, I've been investing for over 10 years on things like Shark Tank deals and other deals. And the majority of my returns come from the companies run by women. He said it's not some kind of academic research. It's real data, money coming back to me. He said of the companies he's invested in, 95% of the women-led companies met their financial targets compared to just 65% for businesses with male leaders. Not that we're making a case against men in leadership. That's not it. But we're actually pretty darn good at this.
Yeah, well, I built my whole company with women. We were in business probably 11 years. I probably had 700 women before I was able to hire my first man. It wasn't like I didn't want to hire men, but they'd walk in and see a whole floor filled with women, and men didn't want to work for me. A lot of women in those days, too, had a biases toward a female boss, thinking she'd be a bitch or hard to work with, which I wasn't. But what Kevin's experience is not identical to mine, I must say. I say there's no difference between the way a woman operates a business and a man. I find if they're serious and they're dedicated and they're ambitious, they find a way to make it to the finish line. And I haven't really been able to see any difference between men and women. I think men are not as good operators as women. I would have to agree with them on that because they're not as much into the detail on it. And in operating a business, you have to be into the detail if you want to succeed at it. But the advantage that some of my male entrepreneurs have over my women, I must say, is they tend to be, from the beginning, more ambitious. They want more for themselves. They want more greed. They want to get to the top of the mountain. They want to claim the credit for getting there. Whereas women tend to share credit very much. They get to the middle of the mountain, set up the tent and everything. It's just a different kind of a headset. So I would agree with him and not agree with him. We'll have to see. He's also a good bullshitter, by the way.
Well, you know what? You're the one that can call him out on that because I'm certainly not going to.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions from the listeners. Felicia says, why is it important to get your name on the title to the house to protect the assets? Not your name, Barbara, but our name as women on the title or any of these assets.
Well, so often the woman's income is counted on the mortgage and her name is on the mortgage. I can't tell you how many women also give me that question, Barbara, in your pocket. They think, well, I'm his wife, I'm in the house, my kids are in the house, but they don't ask if their name could be on the title. And very often it is not. Why is it important? Because if you're responsible for the debt, you certainly should be responsible for the ownership and get the benefit of that.
Yeah. Are there any other assets that we should make sure that our names are attached to them? And look, just because you don't work outside of the home, you are very much working and doing unpaid labor. This is a partnership, remember, right? So, what other assets should we be attaching our names to?
Well, the main other assets are not all that important, I don't think. Like, so you want to have the title to your car too and help make the payment. All right, it's reasonable. But there's nothing really bigger than the house itself. And that's the big kahuna here.
Yeah, that's good. Jill wants to know any good podcasts with finance experts or info for women in finance and credit report monitoring. What kind of advice would you give Jill? And of course, you're going to say, Jill, listen to my podcast. But what advice would you give Jill?
Well, I would say to Jill, Paula, you cover that territory better than anybody that I have seen. So just, I'm not trying to flatter you, but you do. You handle money. I frankly think you know a lot more about it than I do. I'm a little nervous on the interview. This is not my ballot with money. I'm surprised she's asking me these questions. But no, I would say your own podcast is what I would listen to. I've only listened to like 4 of your podcasts, but I did learn a lot, and they were all about money.
Well, maybe I should send you the series I just did on college, which was really fascinating and eye-opening for me. We talked to a New York Times, the money columnist. We talked to a former admissions director from Dartmouth and a couple of parents that were sending their kids. It was really eye-opening.
What do you think is the most important point in that?
When it comes to college, I think what I learned is you have to preface it all with a conversation with your child. This is what really changed things for us is we have this much set aside and we are prepared to pay this much. That now needs to inform your decision because my daughter was looking at a lot of schools out of state. And now that she realizes, I can get, because we live in South Carolina now, Barbara, and if you're in the top, 12% of your class, you can get almost $8,000 every year. So that's almost $30,000 for college. So now she's looking at it from a business lens of, okay, I don't, and we've told her anything above and beyond what we are giving you, you have to figure out how to pay for it yourself. I do want my kids to have some sort of ownership. I think they just take it a little bit more seriously. So knowing that and then figuring out why they want to go to school, that there's not just one school for them and letting them enjoy their high school experience just for the sake of enjoying their high school experience.
But makes very good sense. Yes.
But I realized I'm not supposed to ask a lot of questions on the college tours, but come on, like I have
You've got to. You generally find you ask more questions or have more questions in your mind, at least than the kid is asking. Totally. They're just sitting there like looking around and you've got all these detailed questions.
Yeah. How did Kate determine where she wanted to go to school?
We visited 3 schools on the West Coast. We visited schools upstate New York. All she said is she'd want to be in a really cold climate. And she wanted a medium-sized school so she knew what she needed. And she also needed special ed help because she has real learning disabilities, actually differences, like I should call them. So the college she chose, she knew it was for her because they had the support she needed. And it was a regular college with regular kids, not all special ed. And that's the one she chose. And she is very happy with her decision.
That's amazing. And she wanted a cold weather climate or she didn't want cold weather?
Didn't want a cold weather climate because she had gone to boarding school for 4 years, very far up north, and it was always cold. So she said she had it. So we eliminated the Northeast totally.
Well, it's so interesting. There's such a trend. Students from the Northeast and now the Midwest, the schools down here in the South are outpacing Midwestern schools for Midwestern students. So they're all flocking to the South. Everybody wants to come down to the South. And my daughter, I would love for her to go to Michigan, but she's like, I don't want anything to do with cold weather again. She wants to be warm. So that's a great reason.
Well, wait till she starts school and she's able to visit you more often. You'll change your thinking on that. You'll agree with her.
Unless she ends up going to Clemson, which is just down the road, and she'll only be 30 minutes away. And I said, I promise I won't visit you a ton. Okay, so let me ask you about imposter syndrome, too, because imposter syndrome, yes, this is something that affects highly successful adults. I think probably more so women. But you posted recently, even after you sold, Corcoran Group for $66 million, and you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, you didn't really know what to do. And you kind of felt like, oh my gosh, I think you said, I'm a fluke. And then the first time on Shark Tank, you were like, I didn't want to talk. I was insecure about what I was going to say. Can you talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, how you have just kind of accepted it, but then pushed into it, right? And
I've changed my attitude on that many years ago. I used to think it was a liability and it was a burden to carry that way and to be insecure and not express yourself fully. Now I feel very differently about it. It makes you scared. It makes you think you didn't deserve your success. So what happens from there is you try very hard and you never let up. I think my great forte is how hard I try everything because I'm not confident. So I welcome imposter syndrome. I think it keeps me honest. I know it's fake and I know I shouldn't be feeling it, but it gets me on the edge all the time. It makes me push very hard to do a better job at everything I do. So I like it. And so far as men and women, men don't admit they have it as frequently as women. But if you get to know the successful businessmen and you get to know them well and have a conversation with them, they've got it just as bad. Don't be fooled. They just don't admit it.
Yeah, I think there's real power in just admitting that. And
Yes.
something that if almost all successful people, if you've experienced any sort of success, we all doubt ourselves. So I know I doubted it when I was at the network looking around and you see Michael Strahan and George Stephanopoulos and Diane Sawyer. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing in this room?
Yeah. And you were
But
always comparing yourself to the stars, I'm sure.
yeah. Well, 1,000% I was because I was working, alongside of them. So let me just ask one thing I love about you, Barbara. You are one of the most successful entrepreneurs out there, and you have worked so hard for it. Like, I mentioned earlier, you're one of 10 kids. Like, you're scrappy. You had to be scrappy, right? But one thing I really love about you is you're just like madly in love with your kids, and you became a mother a little bit later. You had Tom, I think, in your mid 40s and Kate in your mid 50s.
Yeah.
What do you think is one of the benefits of having children a little bit later in life?
Well, I had Tommy when I was 48. I adopted Katie when I was 58. And let me tell you, I never took a day for granted. I'm sure that's also true of women who have had children earlier. But what I had is I had wisdom. I knew what was good for the kid and what wasn't good for the kid. So I was kind of like a wise old grandmother raising young kids. I don't know how they felt about it at times, but I think I had more wisdom and I knew where to use my energies and where not to put the stop signs on the kids. I didn't try to mold them like me. Actually, what I found, if the truth be known, when I had Kate adopted, it was more freeing than having my own son because I never looked at her and thought, God, that's just like our father. She's going to drive me crazy. Oh, she's just like me in this way. It was a blank board and it's more of an attitude of like, wow, let's see what we got here. So she was even more free than her brother. But I think when you're older, you give your children more latitude on what's important, You just focus on the important stuff. You don't get caught up in all the other bullshit.
You're an empty nester now. What has that been like for you to have grown kids that are grown and flown?
I can't stand it. Okay. Every day I walk into the apartment, I wish my kids were there. Every time I visit my son and my daughter-in-law, and they had 2 children, and I'm so happy to have my grandchildren, I want to take them home with me and not ever leave there. No, I have not made that adjustment well. And I think the reason for it is I very much think the happiest days and the happiest times of my whole life have been raising my children. So you can't help but long for more of it. You never get enough. I haven't been that very good in that area myself. It's a large empty apartment that I wish I could have a second family and fill it up again with a bunch of kids. But I think at 75, I don't think I'm going to see them even graduate from college. So I'm just never going to do that.
Oh, Barbara, I wouldn't bet against you.
I would at that age.
Grandbabies. What's it like being a grandma? Amazing.
I'm just like every other grandmother out there, like a sucker. I think my kids are the best. And I long to see them every day of the week. So just like everybody else. Yeah.
Well, you're a good mom and you are such a wise woman and an entrepreneur that I look up to. And thank you so much for your time, Barbara.
Can I say one other thing to you, Paula, that I had on my mind a few minutes ago that I wanted to say? You've been asking me a lot of questions about financial wherewithal. And if I were totally honest, I would say that's my weakest trait. And I've managed to build a giant business without finance wherewithal. So I don't think it's always essential for everybody. But if you don't have that, what I have in spades is I have the ability to visualize who I want to be, how I want to accomplish it, how I'm going to get there, what I'm going to overcome. And I think sometimes with a lot of your listeners, if they feel like, oh, I'm never really going to get good with the finance, it's okay. I gave it up a while ago, kind of. And what I know what I'm good at is visualization and a dream of going where I want to go. And I think that's a wonderful roadmap and a business plan instead of a financial plan when you're that type of person.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us, Barbara. And you got a big heart and a big mind And I love how you are so just, benevolent and wanting to share your wisdom with other people.
Well, Paul, I wish you luck, although you don't need it. You have a great thing going. Bye-bye.
Thank you, hon. A big thanks to Barbara for joining the show. I'd been trying to book her for the show for a long time, and I think the wait was worth it. I can't wait to share with you the one thing that has helped relieve some of the tension when it comes to this conversation in just a moment. But I think one of my big takeaways, besides the fact that I love seeing Barbara Corcoran in that doting grandma light, right? I kind of want to be her when I grow up. But my big takeaway from her is that she said as an executive, women didn't ask for that raise. And a lot of it was because we didn't necessarily feel like we were worth it. Men ask for raises a lot more than we do, and they ask for a lot more when they do ask for those raises. And that's not a slight against men in the least. I mean, good for them, right? But we need to know our value and know our worth, and then we need to advocate for it. But I think when we look at that number, right, that 25%, we control the majority of the wealth in this country, and we will continue to do so. But why is it that only 1 in 4, 25% of us, feel confident handling money? Well, when you peel back those layers, you'll find that we're still living under a lot of generational weight. I mean, it wasn't until 1974 with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that women could get a mortgage or a credit card without the signature of a man or her husband. And in a lot of states, we were actively legislated against. Some states went so far as to give the husband complete control over the finances. So we still feel a lot of that tension today. But the thing that has relieved a lot of my personal tension when it comes to this conversation, you guys know that I wrote a book called You Don't Have to Carry It All, Ditch the Mom Guilt and Find a Better Way Forward. And in that book, I spoke to all kinds of experts, right? Theologians, historians, sociologists, thought leaders, and beyond. But what I want to bring up right now is something that Stephanie Kuntz had told me when I was writing this book, and I quoted her throughout the book. She is a historian, and she is an incredibly wise woman. I'm going to read you a little bit from the book, but she said there's plenty of evidence to suggest that men saw their wives as perfectly competent to negotiate anything if they were gone. She says, to take it one more step, women would often take over their husband's trade, whether they were butchers or blacksmiths, if their husband died. They were prepared to do so because they were working alongside of them much of the time. Again, we were perfectly competent to negotiate anything if the men were gone because we had been doing it. She also says that in the medieval period, women were master brewers, beer brewers. They were spinners and dairyers and candle makers and fan makers. She said, no, we weren't equal in the work world, but we were respected because we were productive members of the household and the community. She said men's work, women's work didn't exist. There was division of labor, but a woman worked just as hard as a man. She had to till and work the fields as a laborer. She was also in charge of dairying, salting, and butchering the animals. Okay, I'm never going to complain about the work that I have to do again, but we were respected in the work world, and we were masterful negotiators. So that gave me a lot of freedom, and I think when we have this conversation, we have to put everything into a historical context, right? And we are still living under that generational weight. Again, it's only been a little over 50 years that we've been able to get a mortgage or credit card without the signature of a man or our husband. So anyway, I hope that gave you some context and perspective as we had that conversation. I know it helped me quite a bit. And I'm excited to tell you about a new series that I am kicking off in June. It is all about friendship. And something that I hear from so many of you is that you feel like you have a lot of acquaintances, but you don't have many close friends. So in this series, we're going to talk about how to cultivate deep friendship, the importance of it. Do you need to be friends with your family? Do you need to be friends with people who are different than you? Should you be best friends with your partner? A lot of different angles. Again, we're talking about friendship the entire month of June. And I'm trying to go out with a bang because I told you guys that I am taking the entire month of July off to just take some time for myself, right? I think we all need to rest. And on that note, I hope you guys have a restful week, and I'll see you right back here next week as we continue to talk about it and kick off our series on friendship. I know you guys thought you were done with me, but not quite yet. I have one more thing to tell you about. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe to the show. I don't want you to miss a single beat or a single conversation. And remember, my DMs are always open. Tell me what you want to talk about.